Hey, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Priorities on Purpose. I'm your host, Melissa Batt, a Christian life coach and faith mentor. And today I have the opportunity to bring you someone who I believe is going to give us a ton of insight. This episode, it was really hard for me not to just completely nerd out and ask all the dying questions I would like to ask for myself. Instead, I'm like, focus, Melissa. This is about your audience, not necessarily you. But today we are talking with Christian licensed therapist, Rachael Gilbert, who is the author of the book, Image Restored, Tear Down Shame and Insecurity to Experience a Body Image Renovation. The book is amazing. You're going to want to pause right now, go buy you the book. It's so good. It's very interactive. It's almost like a journal with a book. And then there's even a QR code in the book where you can scan a code and get some teaching lessons where she's helping you go further in it. We talk a lot in this episode about the body image timeline. You guys, we have a lot of insecurities, do we not? Like, how many times is someone's like, oh my gosh, you look so good. And you're like, are you kidding me? I look terrible. If we're honest, and you know I'm all about the real talk, which I love that Rachael is also, our body image issues goes way deeper than surface level and like, I don't think I look good. There's a lot of baggage and a lot of issues, and there's reasons why we struggle with the things that we struggle with. And we're going to be talking about this in this episode. So I want you to know that Rachael is amazing. You're going to love her. Again, pause, go buy the book. You're going to want it. And then also just know that this probably isn't an episode for children because we're going to be talking about some heavy issues. We're going to talk about a lot of like trauma type stuff, which is why we get into these issues. You know, we're talking about body image. We're talking about the correlation with trauma when it comes to those body image issues. Did you know that a lot of women who have body image issues and struggles with, more specifically, rather, I guess, the, eating disorder, stuff like that, disordered eating, whether you don't eat or you eat and purge or you eat too much. I feel like I've struggled with everything, but the purging part, that is a lot of times related to abuse as a child, specifically sexual abuse. And so I just want you to know that she's amazing. You're going to love her. We're going to take this episode and put it into 2 parts. So make sure that after you listen to part 1, you come back and listen to part 2, because I promise you it's equally just as good. Hey there, I'm Melissa Batt, the host of Priorities on Purpose, a podcast for overwhelmed women who are tired of going through the motions. You know there has to be more to this life than the cycle of numbing out, scrolling social media, exhausting yourself with a never-ending to-do list, and still feeling like a failure at the end of the day. You have hope that tomorrow will be different, and I'm here to help you make sure that it actually is. I'm a Christian life coach, and on this podcast, we talk all about intentional living, mental health struggles, and tangible ways to be the best versions of ourselves with Jesus at the center. I promise to be your hype girl and biggest cheerleader as I share simple strategies to help you get out of your rut, eliminate distractions, and live the life you are created for. Are you ready to go beyond existing and learn how to truly live? Put your earbuds in and let's get to it, friend. Rachael, I have to tell you that as I have started following you and connected with you, there are so many similarities between what God has shown me and the call he has on my life and the challenge that he has given me to share with other people. And I feel like the word that he's given you to share with others as well, even though I don't know that when you just meet someone or you see someone, because I think I was introduced to you at the Esther conference by Misty Phillip, but it was 1 second.
Okay.
And so at that moment, it's funny because I've already started crying in this episode because Rachael offered to pray. And so, yeah, I'm already emotional and a little worked up. And that time with Misty, I had gotten super emotional. I was in the process of like tears and everything. And so it's hilarious that here I am, you're making me cry again. Like, I have a feeling this may be something that you do just as, your field of work and all that stuff. So tell everyone who may not know who you are, they must be living under a rock. But like for those who may not, just tell them, who you are, what you're about, what's going on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always fun to be in the chair that's getting interviewed, and I consider that a great honor. So yes, as you mentioned, my name's Rachael Gilbert. I live in Texas with my husband, and we have 3 kids, all teenagers. So we are in the thick of all the things. Our oldest is a senior in high school, and that in itself, I have learned is a full-time job. Just everything. And so those are my favorite things that I get to do. Just my family. It means a lot to me. And then professionally, I am a licensed professional counselor. I am a professor at a local university called the King's University. And then I've written a book. So I'm an author and a speaker, and I also host a podcast. So it's one of those things where when people say, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, which day of the week are you catching me on?" And I'll tell you what I'm doing that day, because I just kind of wear lots of hats. And for me, that works. I like it. And yeah, so I kind of got my hands on a lot of things, but I love all the things that I get to do.
And for those who may not know, her podcast is called Real Talk with Rachael. So if you love Real Talk, you're listening to me, you should definitely check out Rachael's podcast, Real Talk with Rachael. We will link it in the show notes and all the good stuff. So today, I wanted to make sure that we had a very specific conversation based around this book that you wrote, because insecurities is something that I've struggled with my entire life. And it's something I talk about a lot because I do believe it's something that holds a lot of us back. And we need to be set free of these insecurities and figure out what's going on with it and all this. And so you wrote this book. I have it right here. Image Restored, Tear Down Shame and Insecurity to Experience a Body Image Renovation. And so what I've loved about this book, first of all, is that it's not just a book. It's a workbook. It's almost like a journal. I don't know what the word is, it's interactive. That it says it right here, an interactive book. And there's video sessions, which I haven't gotten a chance to watch yet, but I'm super excited to dive into that as well. I've been listening to it in the car when we go on car rides, and then doing the journal work and stuff when I'm home. And I love it because even my daughter, I felt like this was a book that would be really not just beneficial for me, but also for my daughter who just turned 13. I think the good news is, as I have worked the last few years of working through some of my own issues and insecurities, I have been able to, she's not going to have to go through all that stuff that I have gone through. She is very confident. And I love that for her. I wish that was my story. And I know that I'm guessing a lot of, even you, we wish it was our story, but it wasn't. And so there's some work to do. And we have to remember that not only do we need to do this work for ourselves, we also need to do it for those who are coming behind us. And this is breaking these cycles and all of that. So I would love for you to just kind of dive in, tell us more about the book and why this book means so much to you.
Yeah, well, and I love that you did highlight the fact that it's interactive, because that was very on purpose. As a counselor, I just noticed that when a lot of us are consumers, and not very many people actually put some things into action and give them space to do something with it. And so that's why it was very important to me. I actually love that you're it's kind of like a journal. I think I put that in my introduction. I said, I want this to be your body image diary, right? That you can write in and pull the book back out later when you need a certain chapter. And so it's an experience for sure. And I was just really grateful. My publisher caught the vision for what I wanted to do, and they literally let me include every element of the different types of way people learn. by reading, by listening, by watching a video, or by, doing something with your hands. And so whatever type of learner you are, you're going to find something from the book that resonates with you. And what's really neat to me, and the only reason I even, want to share this piece of the book is because I have seen time and time again, because a lot of times I counsel women who are also reading my book. I've seen time and time again how the Holy Spirit will say things to them in a certain chapter that I didn't write about. And to me, I get excited about that. I humble myself enough to say, hey, it's kind of like when we listen to a sermon and you're like, oh, this thing spoke to me. And the pastor's like, that wasn't in the sermon. But to me, it was the fact that our job was to go just open up our hearts to let the Lord speak to us. And then he does what only he can do. And so that's what I've loved about this. And you mentioned why my heart for it. I had 2 girls and then a son as well. So I'm like you. That's not my story. I didn't have not much of a good understanding or even tools, or just lived in so much really bondage for decades. And it wasn't until I was into my adult years that I started to realize, oh, this isn't actually how God intended for us to live in this area of our body, and started to, get some help for myself. And so, yeah, obviously it started out as something for myself, and then my girls, and like, I want things to be a little different for you. And then, of course, other women and as well.
So tell us a little bit, because I know in the book you share a lot about some of the insecurities that you've had growing up. And I think that, I know for me, like, it's a connecting point, because I mean, honestly, like, if I look at you today, and I think this is something that we do often as women. So let's just talk about it. Real talk, right? Yeah. We size someone up based on what we can see in this exact moment. Like, you look like you have it all together, Rachael. Mm-hmm. So why should I listen to anything you have to say about this? I mean, obviously you're a counselor, you're, all of that. So you do have things to say. But I think there's something really powerful when we go beyond the surface and we can see that, like, there are so many facets to us, and we can't just judge a book by its cover. And so Can you share a little bit with our audience who may be watching it on video, or they may be listening to the podcast, like, they may not see you, but if they follow you on social media, that, like, you fitness instructor. I think that's part of, like, your bio. And then, like, oh, a fitness instructor. Of course, she's going to write a book about body image, but that is not what this book is about. And that's my favorite part about the book. So can you go into that a little bit?
Ooh, I love this question so much. And I totally would turn my whole camera around to show you what you can't see behind me, but it would, like, unplug all the things. So I don't want to do that. But this just makes me think of it. If I could flip my screen around, you would see piles of junk behind me. I, like, literally have books and all kinds of stuff stacked up. And so I'm just saying that to say that I feel like that's the same thing of exactly what you just said. We look at somebody and we go, whoa, they're all together, but behind all that, there's some junk that either is currently there or they've had to work through, right? And so if you were defining me like culture, by culture standards, I would be what they called the ugly duckling that, like, bloomed in high school. And so, and again, I'm not saying I was, I'm just saying that's how people, would describe me, because I don't like that ugly duckling term. But all growing up, I was overweight. I wish I could have put photos of me in my book, that my publisher didn't let me do that. But I was overweight. I didn't really care about girly stuff. I always have my hair slicked back in a ponytail and all the things. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of that. So I don't want to harp on that too much. But I, in high school, and so up until this point, all through elementary, middle, and even into part of high school, I'd never even been asked out by a boy. The only reason they would come talk to me is if they were like, hey, will you go out with my friends, so-and-so, or, that kind of stuff. So I just had never had that kind of experience growing up. When I was in high school, I had a very abnormal hip injury that was causing me tons of pain. I went to the doctor and they told me, hey, we don't know totally what's going on. Your hip plates are growing apart rather than together. We need you to lose some weight. We think that if you lost some weight, that could maybe help with this. they didn't tell me how to lose weight or anything, but I just remember leaving going, I didn't know you could control that. Like that was news to me that, oh, wait, what? I can actually, I could change my body some way. And so I stopped drinking sodas, stopped eating candy bars. Those are the only two changes I made. And within a month or so, I had dropped at least 30 pounds. And honestly, the weight just kind of kept coming off. Now, side note, I probably didn't need to be having sodas and candies every day, right? So that kind of was a good health thing for me. And my hip pain did go away. And so there were some positive health changes that were made. But here's where it can get tricky because then the enemy swooped in that season. And for the first time in my life, boys were like noticing me and getting asked out and starting to become a popular girl simply because my appearance changed. That was all that changed about me, right? And so while so many people looked at me and said, whoa, you have it all together now. We're so proud of you. Teachers, parents, peers were so proud of me. And that just deposited so many just lies in me and even more insecurities because if I'm honest, I think I was actually more secure when I was just me. Like I was like, I was okay with who I was, right? And then it changed. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, I'm accepted now. Oh, people are proud of me now. And so then just came in this wrestling for me. Because anybody who's ever lost weight, especially if your weight goes down below where your set point should be, you're into battle to keep it off. And so that's then where, for me, and came some eating disorders and some, definitely body dysmorphia and different things. And yeah, so that was, my story, even going into being a fitness instructor. Part of my reason for wanting to do that was I was like terrified of gaining weight, right? Because I was in this whole disordered eating and all the things. And so I thought, well, if I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, I thought, man, I'll go teach, I'll study this. I studied exercise physiology because I wanted to learn all I could about the body. And then guess what? I got into the fitness world and I realized, shoot, they don't accept me either. Like I wasn't enough for them, even at certain weights. And I share a story about that in my book. And so it was crazy. It was like, hey, I finally have this thing that society has told me if you get it, you'll be loved and accepted. And it still wasn't enough. And truth be told, I had more insecurities when people would look at me on the outside and go, whoa, you look amazing. Inside, I was just crumbling. Like I was a hot mess inside. And so I love that you draw attention to that it's so easy for us to look at people and go, whoa, you must have it all together. And I can speak from experience and say that's actually kind of very often it's not the case. So, yeah.
I love that you mentioned this specific story where you were told to lose weight because in your book, you talk about the body image timeline. And I have had, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, which I didn't even know what that was. So it's not like, someone has diagnosed me with that. But at 100 pounds, I was worried that I would not sit on a roller coaster. When I think about that girl who was in 7th grade, who felt like she could, there was so much shame and panic in the idea of getting on a roller coaster and being told you wouldn't fit, that I would have to be turned away. And where that came from, that, I love that you brought that up in this book. And where are these moments in your life where these things came up? And so you talk about that in your book. I've shared lots of my, I know what mine are, a lot of them. I mean, I grew up, it's so weird. I love my family, but why in the world they said some of the things that I grew up, to this day, I'm still called Miss Piggy by my uncle. He means nothing by it, but that's my nickname. Spare tire, garbage disposal, lots of very hurtful things. I could go on and on and on about, comments that were made. Again, I'm in 8th grade. I'm healthy. I wasn't always in a healthy place with my weight. At this point, I saw the video and my sister, who's younger than me, makes a comment, I'm not there. And my sister is like, well, it's a good thing Misty, that's what I was called back in the day, Misty isn't here because there wouldn't be any food left. Like that comment was made when I wasn't even there. And at that point, I was already in, an eating disorder and really, again, trying to control. I think food is something that I major struggles with. But I love that in your book, you go back to this body image timeline and you talk about the process of restoring one's body image. And then you talk about traumatic events. And so can you just go into that a little bit more? Because I think that's such a powerful conversation.
Yeah, I feel like tends to be a conversation that is missing when it comes to most body image type resources that are out there. It just shapes us. I mean, we all have, like you said, from the comments that were made, sometimes the comments that weren't made, the behaviors we witnessed. I've counseled women who are like, well, my mom never said anything, but I do remember my mom was always dieting and always weighing herself. And she was, 100 pounds or, a very small woman. And so it's messages we've received. So there's all kinds of, there are layers to this, obviously, but then there's also the traumatic events that happen in our lives. And so we call there's some smaller T traumas, like, maybe some things that were said to us or just different things that are on the outside looking in, you may not recognize as a big deal, but that just sent a message that something is wrong with me that needs to be fixed. And then, of course, any type of trauma in our body, sexual trauma for sure affects us, but then also even any other kind of trauma, like that, just like, car accidents, like stuff that, again, feels like out of control in your body. And your body it holds on to a lot of emotion and around these memories. And so it starts to shape us. And so that's why I wanted to do the body image timeline. Is it's worth for most people, very few people have actually stopped and been like, what is on my timeline that maybe either I need to, do some processing and some therapy around, and also just some core messages that I need to take to the Lord and say, Lord, I need you to help me reset this negative core belief that I've taken on about myself does not line up with God and his word.
It kind of goes back to taking every thought captive. And, one of the things that as someone who has struggled with flying by the seat of my pants my entire life, one of the things that I've worked really hard on is slowing down and being intentional. And I've also lived most of my life in survival mode. So I've been on that hamster wheel. That's probably why I was flying by the seat of my pants. And it felt like I was thriving, but really I definitely was not. And so now, as I've been able to slow down and recognize, like, I need to be intentional, and that is with our thoughts as well. And so, taking our thoughts captive, first of all, we have to recognize what thoughts we have and then ask God to help us flip the script. And I think the cool thing about like the body image timeline for me is like looking at these could very well be areas where there's some brokenness. And so many times those are areas where we don't want to go because it's not comfortable. Most of us have spent our entire life avoiding it or, keeping it buried under the surface. But when we can address it and acknowledge it and take it to God and process through that, that is where the true healing comes. And so I think this process that you're talking about is so powerful in so many areas to work through, not just for changing your thoughts, but also like there's something that I heard a long time ago, and it's like shackled people can't free slaves.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of us who want to change the world and we want to impact the world in a positive way. And we're like trying to do this work, but we still have work that we need to do as well. And it's easy for us who, I think a lot of my audience, like we struggle with rejection and these insecurities and this orphan spirit, which I'm just kind of starting to learn about. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I know that it is a thing. But we want to focus on everyone else because they are worthy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, like we can only do so much, and God needs us to pay attention to ourselves so that we can be truly free, so that we can do that work, but also like he wants us free, right?
Yeah.
Like we are not supposed to continue in this bondage, which is what these insecurities, all of these struggles that you talk about in your book.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on that?
On which piece?
Any of it? Like what comes up for you?
Yeah. The thing that came up for me is just the being willing to do the work, not only for ourselves, but for everybody else that we influence, you know? So maybe you are a biological mom and you have kids, but all of us are, even if you're not a mom, all of us are influencing somebody. And it takes at least one person standing up and saying, hey, I'm willing to make this a priority, right? Be purposeful about it. Say, hey, I'm not okay with the way things have been, and I don't want to see them keep going this way. So it starts right with us. It always starts with us. I have moms who will come to me and say, how do I help my daughter? And I start talking to them about them first, because I'm like, okay, let me see where you are, right? It's so often we want to help other people get help, but we're not being willing to go, oh, maybe I also need help. You know, even if it's not body image for some people, like you said, we all have a story. We all have trauma in our lives. People get a little squeamish to talk about it. And a lot of people think, oh, I don't have trauma, but you probably do. And the good news is the Lord is a gentleman. He will, if he brings something up, it's because it's on the way out. It's because he's saying, hey, I would love to deal with, to heal it, reveal it and heal it, you know? And so we can trust the process. We can trust that it's, you know, nice and slow and steady. And for anybody that this brings up some hesitation to go into their body image timeline, I do. And, you know, I mentioned this a couple of times in my book, especially if you know you've got some big traumas in your life, like sexual abuse or, you know, just some big things. It is going to be very important for you to go do this with the help of a professional, because it will be a battle to even feel safe enough, right? Our body goes into all the different responses when we don't feel safe. And so you got to feel safe first to even feel like you can kind of start looking at some of these things, because the last thing I want anybody to do is like dredge up all this stuff and then be like overwhelmed with it. You know, that's not what we want. And so if you're listening and you're like, that feels so scary, then okay, then go do it with somebody. Don't do it alone, for sure. Yeah.
That's a great question, and something that I know that I have struggled with a little bit. So in 2019, there was an incident that happened that I just did not take well. Like, it was a really big deal, but the way my body reacted to it was very different than the way I think most people would have reacted to it. And through that experience, like, I mean, I had so much fear, so much anxiety. I felt like a prisoner in my home because of like the way the situation was. But in that, I realized like, this is beyond me and I'm going to need help, you know? And so I went to a doctor, started there. I did end up going to a therapist, and she was extremely helpful. And in that, though, like, I had to be willing to say things that was so scary and things that I had never said to somebody ever. Like, there's a series that I want to do one day called Is This Normal? Because I think there's so much, like, for me, and I remember one time I actually asked a friend, I was like, is this normal? Like, is this something that you experienced? And she was like, yeah, that's what we did. And, you know, come to find out, it wasn't normal, because it just wasn't. But what I didn't know is that, like, she had also been sexually abused. And so her normal wasn't normal either, but we both just thought that was normal because we didn't know what we didn't know. And so I remember this moment with my therapist that I got really brave and I asked the question, you know, like, so is this normal? And that was one of the most courageous moments of my life to be able to go there. And so I would love for you as a therapist to just like, how can you encourage someone who's thinking about therapy or already in a relationship with a therapist? Because the one thing I love is like, I feel like a therapist, in my experience, they don't poke and prod. They kind of wait for you to bring it, like lean into that. And so what would you say in regard to that and how to be brave in that? Totally off topic, but this is where I'm like, this is where I feel like we're supposed to go.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. You know, a trauma-informed therapist, we don't go mining for trauma. That's what I like to tell people. And exactly like you said, because, you know, again, back to God is a very gentle God. And if we were to pull up everything all at once, that would shut the healthy person down. And that's not the goal, right? And so, and even trauma is very individual to each person. It's anything out of the ordinary that left some kind of a mark on you, right? And so that's why some people can walk through the same thing, and one person's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." You know, they can hear something and it didn't bother them, and the next person's like it really devastated them, and that's completely normal. And I think I also love, Melissa, that you brought up the fact that a lot of times trauma can be normalized because it was in our system. Meaning that was your family system you grew up in, or your school system, your church system. We're all part of all these systems, right? And so certain things can be normalized in a system that really aren't normal, you know? And it takes us bringing that out to somebody to be like, hey, so this is my normal in my system. And for them to go, all right, let's talk about that. Let's kind of, go through that. And so that's, to the person who might be not sure about going to a therapist or anything like that, definitely do, look into what things matter to you in a therapist. If it's important for you to see a Christian therapist, make sure you're, researching that. If it's important to you that you want to be seeing a trauma-informed therapist or somebody who specializes in trauma. And that just, also all therapists, we know the first, however many sessions it takes, our number one job is to build rapport with somebody, which just means, do you trust me? Right. And because if you don't trust your therapist, we're not going to get very far. And so that's exactly like what you mentioned there of we're not going to poke and prod. Well, because that's going to make you get defensive. Nobody wants to feel interrogated. Like if you interrogate somebody, they're just going to throw up walls and just shut down, and you're not going to get very far. Yeah. So it is. It's finding the right fit, and don't be afraid to. You go to one therapist and you're like, yeah, this is not a good fit. You can go to somebody else, just like you would with any doctor. You can go, you know what, this isn't the best fit for me. I'm going to go try somewhere else. And don't be afraid to do that.
Hey friend, that's it for this episode. If you found value, I would love it if you could take a couple of seconds and leave me a quick review. While it may seem super simple, it is so beneficial and gives me the opportunity to help more women. Also, take a screenshot and share it on social media with your biggest aha today. Don't forget to tag me at Melissa Batt Official so we can connect. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, friend, keep walking it out one baby step at a time, because God's got you.